Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Fundecitrus, I would like to welcome all present and also those watching the live broadcast online. We'll begin the ceremony for the announcement of the 2018-2019 orange crop estimate and the tree inventory for São Paulo and southwest of Minas Gerais citrus belt. The tree inventory and the crop estimate have been performed by Fundecitrus since 2015 in cooperation with Marques Strat, Unesp Jaboticabal, and USP-FEA. This work democratizes the access to information and serves as a basis for decisions to be made by citrus growers. The tree inventory has gone through a complete update. New satellite images enabled all groves in the citrus growing region to be visited. What's new this year is that, in addition to the announcement of the orange inventory data, information on the production of acid lime, Sicilian lime, and tangerines will also be presented. Our event will follow this order: crop estimate announcement, presentation of the tree inventory main data, and a Q&A session as well. Os dados do inventário de árvores ficaram restritos apenas aos profissionais vinculados ao Access to the tree inventory data was restricted only to professionals linked to Fundecitrus. I'd like to invite the president of the Fundecitrus board, Dr. Lorival Monaco. He is together with the Secretary of Agriculture and Supply, Dr. Francisco Jardim, the General Manager of Fundecitrus, Juliano Aires, Political, Institutional, and Methodological Coordinator of PES, Marco Fava Neves, full professor part-time at FEA-USP, and board member of Marques Strat and other organizations. The Executive Coordinator, Vinicius Gustavo Trombin, also from Marques Strat. And professor at Unesp and coordinator of statistics, José Carlos Barbosa. We also invite to the ceremony Supervisor of PES, Fernando Delgado, Roseli Reina, and Renato Rovaroto. Just to add, as I had mentioned before, data were restricted only to professionals linked to Fundecitrus, namely the president of the board and general manager for for Fundecitrus, past supervisors, and those linked to Marques Strat, Unesp Jaboticabal, and USP-FEA. All of them are subject to confidentiality obligations before the announcement is made public, according to agreements signed between each of them and Fundecitrus. The figures for the crop estimate have only been consolidated in a meeting right before this event. Right now, I would like to thank the presence of Marcos Tomazella, coordinator of CDA. Please, a round of applause. I also would like to invite those here to take a seat so that we can proceed to the next presentations. Now I would like to invite you all to watch a video that summarizes the methodologies and technologies employed in the survey.
agriculture in Sao Paulo, along with Minas Gerais, is top ranking in the world. It creates about 200,000 jobs, involving families and cities, management and succession, science and sustainability. With its orange crop forecast survey and tree inventory, Fungi Citrus delivers to citrus growers a complete scan of the citrus belt in São Paulo, west-southwest of Minas Gerais, providing detailed information on planted area, cultivated varieties, age of trees, planting density, irrigation, and removed groves. This information makes it possible for each citrus grower to interpret their reality, develop their own strategies, and explore opportunities. To plan for the future, it is necessary to understand the present, carried out with full respect for the competitive balance, while assuring that growers' identity be kept confidential at all times. The crop forecast democratizes access to information and serves as a basis for qualified decisions to be made by citrus growers. In order to find the components of an equation to estimate the amount of orange boxes for the crop, a team formed by 120 professionals covered approximately 1 million kilometers to visit all farms comprising the citrus region. Sent out by Airbus satellites, geo-referenced images enable the identification of every block precise location. Since images are in sync with GPS coordinates, traveling to farms becomes easier, speeding up data collection. All survey processes are audited. After establishing proportionality with strata that are truthful to reality, blocks are drawn for fruit stripping. Randomly chosen blocks guarantee the survey is unbiased. In addition to a constantly improved methodology, there is news in this year's work.
Now we invite
Data on the
President
extent
of
of
Fundecitrus,
areas
Dr. Lorival
planted
Carmo
with
Monaco,
acid
to have the
lime,
floor
lemons,
in order to
and
announce the
tangerine,
2018-2019
plus the citriculture
orange
profile,
crop estimate.
presenting
Good morning.
information on
Good morning,
general
everyone.
aspects of how
It's a
this business
pleasure
is carried out at
to
farms.
have you all here to show you once
For any
again
decision
the
making,
work that has
either
been carried
agricultural
out
or
through
commercial,
us.
being
Technology
well informed is always
towards
better.
citriculture
Bringing
is
the
increasingly
future
more
within
important.
reach is
I'd
one of
like
the
to
main
thank
contributions of the
President
crop forecast
Dr.
survey.
Francisco Jardim, that is a former member of the board of Fundecitrus, and the other present here on stage, and all of you. But also I'd like to highlight the most important point. We have 120 people working on this project, and we only get to know the estimate figures. Well, in my case, I just got to access to results. We started a meeting at 9 o'clock this morning. It's a very criterious work that we carry out, and it's a lot of responsibility. And thanks to this work, the way it's been carried out, we have been able to keep information confidential, its reliability, and we have relied on the work of so many technical people, but especially the citrus growers that today believe this process and have helped us a lot in pursuing not only the understanding of the crop to create a better business that is much more friendly, and it's a win-win business for all parts involved in the productive chain, but also to mainly avoid difficulties for the citrus growers to make decisions on their crops. And our top concern is to keep information updated. Without further ado, I would like to proceed to the announcement. This is not an Oscar award, but I just got to know this right now. The crop estimate then for 2018-2019 is of 288,230,000 boxes. What's more important here is that this figure, this production, represents 11% less than the historical average for the last 10 years and 28% as compared to the previous crop. That shows that we have had an image, a scan of all changes that take place, and that depends on the follow-up of the program. So once again, we have the reliability of all, and we hope that this crop is reached with figures like this, and that growers, citrus growers, are those that benefit the most from this type of information. I'd like to thank all of them. I would like now to give the floor to Dr. Jardim. He'll have to leave soon. He made all efforts possible to be present here with us today, so I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Jardim for his words. And it's been a pleasure for us to have him in this meeting with us. And now, his words, please. Good morning, everyone. It's been a great pleasure to be able to come here today, not a sacrifice at all. I remember something that happened 10 years ago as a board member of Fundecitrus. It was a very difficult time for citrus industry. And I remember that my friend Roberto Rodrigues, then Minister of Agriculture, he said that when he was born, we had the citrus tristeza virus. At that time, there was a problem. And that was, then afterwards, the citrus canker became really a problem. And we always use a scientific basis. I'd like to here render a tribute to Professor Jimenez for his leadership. And we organized then work together with the Secretary of Agriculture. And then the Department of Agriculture invested $8 million for 5 years towards Fundecitrus work. And we then had a scan performed to have a field scouting so we could deal with the citrus canker. Today, the problem is greening. So I'd like to greet Mr. Lorival Monaco. He's a friend of, for a long time, previously Secretary of Agriculture, and also a citrus grower. I was really interested in the crop, and I asked him, Monaco, how is your crop going? And I said, well, I increased 22%. We placed some bets here, and also we talked to João, that was our colleague also. He was with Cargill now, and now he's with Dreyfus. So we talked about, I said 295, and we wanted to place bets, and 288. So just would like to also greet Juliano, that provides us with a lot of support. All the technical people and researchers in this area count on you. Congratulations on your work. We have an important history here with us and at Fundecitrus, and we respect your work. Marcos Fava, important person in studying this area. He has a history that begins in his family. His father is also our friend, José Carlos Barbosa, a professor in math and science. Thank you for your work. Vinicius Tombin, congratulations. You are the executive coordinator for Marquistrat, our colleague and friend Tomazella. And I greet in his name all my colleagues at the Secretary of Agriculture, people at CATI and research support, Roseli, Renato, those in the industry, professionals in the sector. I'd like here to bring my best to João Batista, Wagner, and you always support the production sector. And here I'd like to greet all the citrus growers in name of Nicolau and Marcos. It's an honor for me to be here with you today. I am taking on the position of Mr. Arnaldo Jardim. We have the same last name, but we are not related, and I'm going to continue his work. The idea of Márcio França is for us to be together with the productive sector. We talked about greening here, and greening has been a serious problem with us. We have had long discussions about it within the Secretary of Agriculture, especially regarding some questions that may disseminate the disease, like abandoned groves, and that is something we have to deal with together, Monaco. We have to have an integrated action for that, and we are trying to have legislation on that set forth. And you know what it is, an abandoned grove. And our concern here, I was talking to Monaco about it. So we have to deal with those that are going to be, those groves that are going to be abandoned. We have a situation here in Botucatu, and we have to have integration between the city hall, citrus growers, and rural workers union, so that we can identify the problem and have stronger action towards controlling abandoned groves. So I'd like to tell you how pleased I am of being here to see all of you working on this sector. I remember some years ago we had 660,000 hectares. Today we have 400,000. We have the largest grove. It's still the largest grove in the world, and we produce a lot. We export, and we have more than 200,000 jobs that we have to keep. So again, this is a message from Márcio França, and we are together. We are partners. Let's go on with this process. So I'd like to greet you all, and I hope this process can also increase prices for orange in our producing groves, to increase income and increase our share in the market so we can export more. I apologize for having to leave. I have a meeting in 2 hours in Sao Paulo, but here I'd like to leave my best. Tomazella is going to be here to represent myself. So thank you very much, Monaco, and congratulations to you all. Thank you. Here's a toast to citrus growing in Sao Paulo State. Thank you very much. Would like to thank you for your words, Mr. Secretary of Agriculture and Supply, Mr. Francisco Jardim. Now would like the other members of this table. Oh, this is an official toast with orange juice. Right now, would like to invite those here at the table to please take a seat on the first row in this auditorium. Would like to invite now the General Manager of Fundecitrus, Juliano Aires, to have the floor and present the data in the citrus region inventory and crop estimate. Please, a round of applause. Good morning, everyone. Now we have this mission of showing in a brief presentation all the work carried out this year in 2017, 2018. This year we have more information due to our having. Besides the crop estimate, we also have an inventory that has just been adjusted for orange, lime, and tangerine. So we have a lot of new information. Okay, so good morning. Let's start our presentation. We are going to have two focal points in this presentation. The presentation on orange, and then the crop, and then the tree as inventory. We include here the Sao Paulo and southwest of Minas Gerais. So the final figure is 288.29 million boxes. We are going to provide you with details in terms of how we reached that figure. It's important to highlight that in the previous year, we had the highest yield in the history of citriculture. We closed the crop with the number above 360 million boxes, and now it's 288 million. That is 28% smaller than that of 2017 and 11% lower than the historical data or average for the last years, 10 years. We know that there is some fluctuation in the crop because most of the groves in the state of Sao Paulo are not irrigated, and the determining factor for a crop is related to the climate, rainfall that take place, especially after flowering. They determine the fruit setting and also in a second time the final size of the fruit. So just would like to remind you that first we're going to be talking about the tree inventory and then the orange crop estimate. We couldn't make this presentation without thanking all the technical people involved in this work. We have a very strong team that works on a daily basis, including representatives of citrus growers, orange juice companies that also have a very important presence in this area, and we have the leadership of Vinicius in this work. I'd like to highlight it. So Vinicius, congratulations. You have led our team in a very remarkable way. And Professor Barbosa as well, that has added a lot in terms of statistics and also the experience of Dr. Marcos Fava. It all helps us have this view as a group, and also under Dr. Monaco, that brings transparency and importance to this work. This work is totally objective. It's not subjective. It's rather based on figures. There's a method, and when we announce the figure, we are very confident that this figure is related or is close to the actual crop. Of course, they can change along the year, especially due to climatic factors that will affect the fruit weight and the fruit drop. So just to summarize what has been done since last year, well, in May 2017 to July, we collected image from satellites, and then we had the in-loco mapping once we had those satellite images in hand. And then we added something else that we're not going to go into details about today. It is the citrus grower profile for different regions is stratified by size, of farm, and what has been done in terms of controlling pests and diseases, and how they have adapted to this citrus growing industry scenario. And then after having this tree inventory in hand, we proceeded to yet another counting, because it might be that some plots have been eradicated or replanted, so we have this more precise image now. And from March to April, and the last 2 months, then we have the fruit, the tree stripping of fruit, and we count per bloom, per region, per age in different regions. And then we can come to a to balance the figures, and then we come to a final equation to determine the crop. This year, differently from 2015, when the last inventory was carried out, and also due to the importance, not only in terms of economics, but also in terms of plant health, especially related to greening, we then added to this inventory acid lime and Sicilian lemon, and also tangerines, besides fresh fruit. So here we can have a more detailed view of what's going on. Therefore, how have we divided data into varieties? Well, we have the early season varieties. The main one is Hamlin, and then Weston, there's a better quality, and then mid-season Pera. And then for the early varieties, we have Valencia Americana, Pineapple, and Seleta. And the late varieties include Valencia and Folha Murcha and Natal. And other varieties that are especially aimed at fresh fruit, Bahias or Navel, Baianinha. And then we have the sweet lime and also Chamula de Bratas. And then the acid lime Tahiti and the Sicilian lemon, and also the tangerines like Poncan and Murcott, as well as others. So, where is the citrus belt located? This figure, this picture changes a long time. Here we have orange groves in yellow, and then red tangerines and green, acid lime and lemon. Here we have regions, they're very distinct. And here we have the 5 major sectors of agriculture: central, north, northwest, south, and southwest. We're going to be talking about each of them later. So when we see the number referring to the citrus area comparatively, what we see is that from the last inventory, 2015, to the current one, there's been a reduction of 482 hectares to 460 hectares. 65. So when we look at details, orange reduced from 430 to 401. For other oranges, we have stable figures with a reduction of, like here, 13,000 to 12,000. It's a relatively small change. For acid lime and lemon, it grew a lot for the last 3 years, like 40% increase. So we have here almost 40,000 hectares of lemon, and then fresh fruit as well. Tangerines, especially Murcott and Poncan, a growth of 21%. When we stratify data here in 2018, we can see that today orange, that is aimed at processing and fresh fruit, to represent 86%, other oranges almost 3%, acid lime and lemon 8.4%, and tangerines 2.6%. So this is the picture for the last inventory, including mature and young groves. So where are lemons and acid lime? We can see that mainly they are present in 3 regions. This one, that is central,
na direção ao norte,
a little bit towards the north, and then some to the south, Mogi, Limeira, or Itajobi, Catanduva in the central area, Matão, Itápolis, and northwest, that is Votuporanga, Jales, that is also another important region, besides other areas that are not as important. So when we look at how this is divided, well, this basically
99%
shows that we have 90% of acid lime, and then others that are not identified, and also the Sicilian lemon. 90% of lemon is acid lime, almost 40,000 hectares. Sicilian lemon, almost 10%. And then 1% non-identified or other types of lemon or lime.
E em relação às tangerinas,
As for tangerines, here we have
ela está
its distribution
dos limões,
that differently from lemons, it's more
tangerina também na região sudoeste,
well distributed. Here northwest and also south, central, and also northwest, in a way that we can produce tangerine during the whole year.
as regiões mais frias que são as mais
Here we have the colder regions with the later production, and more to the north and northwest when we have earlier production, especially adding irrigation to it. So what's the distribution like? Almost
parecido
the same.
pacotes de
Marcots and pumpkins are the major varieties. They account for 90% of the production, and the 11% the other tangerines. So
de próximo de 3%
almost 3% within the citrus belt for Sao Paulo.
E as laranjas? Que é
What about oranges? That is the main point of our presentation here today. What happened in the last inventory 2015 as compared to this year 2018? Here, orange for processing and fresh fruit. We can see that the distribution of orange, differently from that of tangerines and lime and lemon, is much more comprehensive. It covers the 5 sectors of the state. So we divide the citrus belt in 12 regions, and orange is really important in the state. Up to 90% here for oranges aimed at processing and fresh fruit. So we have seen figures, these figures before. When we look at orange, now we have a reduction of 7% from 430,000 hectares. It came down to 401,000. That is 29 hectares, 1,000 hectares less. The only sector where we had stable figures with a little trend of growth is the southwest region. In central and south regions, we had a reduction of almost 10%, 110, 19. That are the regions where we have the most incidence and severity of greening. So we have growths eliminated due to this disease. You know how devastating this disease can be. And northwest region here with large reduction as well. And the north region with a little decrease. When we try and stratify the region so that we understand why there's the reduction of 29,000 hectares took place, then we have some components. In blue, that is the most important here, is the expansion area. 14,000 hectares have been planted. And part of the abandoned groves, a very low percentage here, because of better prices, they have been recovered. So that part of the abandoned groves that we had checked to be present in 2015 have been eradicated, 4,400 hectares, and we had also eradicated areas because of crop change, renewal, or any other goal that the citrus, or rather the grower, had in mind. Here, in a more detailed manner, we have each of the regions. So the productive or bearing trees, Here we have 403 is the total of orange trees. Here we have a segmentation in 5 sectors. So all regions
houve uma redução
showed a reduction in bearing groves for orange.
foi as árvores não produtivas. Em média,
And here's without the non-bearing trees. Here for the north, center, and south, we had a reduction of almost 10%. North region is more or less stable, whereas the southwest kept the same. So the major retraction of the disease is due
da área de sítio,
to the decreased
centro-sul,
area of citrus in the central and south and northwest due to a climatic situation.
em termos de
In terms of plantings,
que ocorreu nos anos
what took place in 2015, 17, and 16? Well, plantings had a little upward trend, especially in 2017. We see that this figure here is linked in terms of hectares and area, acreage. And when we analyze this in details, approximately 58% of new plantings have been replanted and 42% expanded. So it's almost stable or balanced. So replanting is still the most important factor here. Then, and what happened a long time? Well, we could see that there was a period from 2005 to 2010 or 11 of a very large expansion that took place, especially due to the hurricanes in Florida and the major eradication at the time of citrus canker, where prices were really high, and then we planted more. And then from 2013 to 17, there's been a certain stabilization with a downward trend afterwards. And the last 3 years are those that we showed before, with 11 to 12,000 hectares being planted every year. When we analyze now per tree, remember it's different. We have the planting density, and let's see what changes that figure. Well, in 2015, we had 197,859 trees, and now in 2018, this number came down to 194 million, a reduction of almost 3.5 million plants, that is 2%. Now, in terms of non-bearing trees, inventory is reduced from 23,000 to 19,000. So that is 19% reduction. Now, in terms of varieties planted for processing orange, we have the early varieties. Hamlin, Westing, and Ruby decreased 4% in this downward trend. The other early varieties, Valencia, Americana, Pineapple, and Seleta, this figure was a little bit higher, 4%. One thing offset the other. The Valencia Americana is the most planted variety here. Pera Rio grew, moving from 68 million to 70 million total trees. And Valencia Folia Murcha reduced from 67 to 63. That is a 6% reduction. Valencia is the variety that reduced the most proportionally. And Natal has a little bit of an upward trend, 1% as compared to 2015. When we analyze data per size of farm, here there's a very important component for us to analyze. In fact, the area has been decreasing in this state, but the profile of citriculture has changed. That is a worldwide trend, in fact. We can see that around 54% of orange trees in different farms are refer to 200 citrus growers out of this total. So more than 50% refer to 198 farms.
Essa diminuição
Why
do número de
has
propriedades e essa
the number of farms decreased with this concentration of production? Well, the main explanation for this is greening. A disease has a very important effect on borders, especially for the small citrus grower or farms, because there is no global action
que nós podemos observar.
in place. Here we can see, this is the survey for greening 2017, where we could see that for the last 3 years, we have a number up to 17%. The decrease has increased, and then we have the stabilization here at 17.
Mas quando se analisa por tamanho de propriedade,
But when we see the size of farms, what we can see is that in areas with below 2,200 hectares, 22 hectares, then the percentage is very high. And when we see areas with the 22 to 22, 22.1 to 22.9 hectares, then it's a different percentage, that is 29.15. So we need to have integrated work with the joint efforts, especially in terms of the mid and small size farms. We have to have regional work carried out with coordinated actions to control psyllid and
eliminação da fonte de nó.
to eliminate the inoculum source. Our coordinator that is here, Mr. Tomazello, has helped a lot, but I think we have to have the help of the Secretary of Agriculture to try and decrease the losses of mid and small size farm owners. So 80% of contaminated plants will be present in the first 100 meters around the plots, that is, in the border area. So this is part of the 10 commandments of Fundecitrus. You're going to have a meeting now, 22 and 22nd of May, to see what we can do to better deal with greening. As of 2004, when we detected greening, we can see that there's been a change in terms of behavior and decision made by citrus growers in terms of density. Density increased. It moved from 400 plants per hectare to almost 670 plants per hectare now. And in average terms, when we have a balance between adult growths and young growths, then we have 484 plants per hectare. Irrigation. This is another surprise. In citriculture, we have had modernization. Citrus growers are pursuing efficiency even more. And in 2015, the inventory showed an irrigated area of 24.5% of the area. And whereas today, that is above 30%. We have 120,000, almost 121,000 hectares irrigated, especially in the central, north, and northwest of the state, where citrus growers have made a decision of using higher density and irrigation, and also rootstock that is more tolerant to the disease and more tolerant in terms of blight, and also the better quality of the fruit. Another point that has been mentioned by Francisco Jardim, and we agree that an abandoned growth is a problem, but it's not the only problem. We also have a concern with yards and small properties, small farms. They are non-commercial. But here we show a little bit of the situation from 2015 to 2018 in terms of abandoned growths. In the last inventory, number of hectares for citrus, 2015, we had almost 10,000 hectares, 9,952. And now in 2017-18, we have had a reduction of 40% in that figure of abandoned groves. Many groves were eradicated or have been replaced by another crop. So the current number is about 6,000 abandoned growth. And when we see that
Observar que as duas principais áreas
in detail, we see that the two main areas are in the central and south areas where we have the highest
de green
occurrence of greening, and northwest, that is also an area of
condição adversa
adverse conditions in terms of climate. So the three sectors are the main ones where we have a concentration of abundant growth. The north and southwest regions also are important in terms of abundant growth, but with a lower number of that. So this percentage of abundant growth has gone down, especially due to this new area of, or this new situation of citric culture, because it has been paid well citrus growers in the state of Sao Paulo mainly. Now is the second part of my presentation that will show in details how we have come to the figure that Dr. Monaco presented to us first, 288 million boxes. So there is a methodological work in for the inventory shown before in figures. Let's see the step-by-step now. So there is this equation, this mathematical equation that provides us with some confidence as for the number shown here. So here we have bearing trees in this inventory. Today we have this exact number, and then fruit per tree that was found in a stratified way, including resets to almost 2,600 plants. So here we have the fruit size that may change. It's a variable that we have dealt with a lot to try and increase accuracy. And also we have the fruit drop that is really important. Also, there is a correction factor for events that we cannot explain within the four factors. That is death of plant during the process and things of the like that are all included in this correction factor that is 10%. So let's see first the profile of the blooms. Each year is something different that takes place because the floral induction will depend on climate that will then include rainfall and temperature, winter and cold temperatures. So what we can see here is that if you consider all varieties, and that's an average for all the varieties, the first bloom that took place in August and other places and to the end of October, it represents more than 70% of the total. Second bloom, it has a payoff effect, accounting for 12.72%. Third bloom, 13.29%. And the fourth bloom, we subdivided that, in fact, in an early and late bloom, and it's a little bit above 3%. That totals 100%. So the first bloom is where we have the most important production. So what happened in terms of number of fruit as compared to 2018 to 2017? In the 12 regions where we stratified data, we have two regions that were exceptions. The southwest region, that is Avaré, Taquarituba, Itapetininga. Next to Botucatu, there's been an upward trend of 3%. Avaré here represented, and Itapetininga even higher, 17%. So what's in blue shows an upward trend in terms of growth. And for the other regions, well, I divided them into two groups. Growth for the most central areas that are Duartina, Matão, Altinópolis, Porto Ferreira, that is the central south region, with a decrease of 20 to 30%, 21, 28. And when we analyze details here. Well, Limeira a little bit lower down trend, 13%. But Northwest, Votuporanga, Rio Preto, where we have highest temperatures with a higher deficit after flowering, then we have 50 to 54% decrease, and Bebedouro 45%. So we can see that the yield or number of fruit is very variable due to different regions. Each region has a different situation from the other. And what about differences among varieties? Well, this is the same as it happened before in other years. The early varieties are the most productive ones, 766 fruit per tree. Other early varieties, Americana and Pineapple, 664. Natal this year with a higher yield as compared to Valencia and Folha Murcha, 603 as compared to 560, and Pera that has a very low number here that has caused the number of fruit to go downward, 454. So that interferes with the total number of fruit per tree. So how have we stratified the plot by age group? Well, we changed that methodology. And first we would change we would use ages 1, 2, 3, and we would work with those plants or varieties at the planting year. Last year and this year we changed that. We have more detailed work carried out where we see also what we have in terms of resets in other age groups. For example, category 0 is different grows, 0 to 3, 3 to 5, and 6 to 10. And then we see for all the crops what we have in the different age groups, and so on and so forth. And for older growths, adult growths, mature growths, we see what we have in terms of all resets and age groups, so that we could stratify it all and come to a number of fruit per each category, and also for resets in different groups. That changes a lot in function of age groups. So we have 6 categories, in fact, because we subdivide them and we analyze yield for different resets and growth. Here's for you to have an idea of the importance of each variety. So for 1 to 2-year-old growth, one age group, 3 to 5, 97% of plants are the original ones, and 3% refer to plants in the category 0. A certain percentage of that. For 6 to 10 years of age, then we have 94% of original plants, and the other 5 to 6% refer to intermediate. And for mature growths, that is 10 or more years of age, then we have 11% of resets for different strata and 89% of adult plants. It's important for us to understand that, because here we see that the yield changed a lot from one plant that is original, planted in a plot. It changes from a reset. So from 3 to 5-year-old tree, we have a production of 234. And here, in the same age group, in a different plot, we have 107 that is a very much lower yield. So from 6 to 10, we have here 493 fruit per tree. So, and here we have 265 for the 6 to 10 years, and here above 10, 763. So here number of fruit for growths above 10 years of age.
Então, nós falamos do número de
So
árvores,
we have the number of tree
nós falamos do número de frutos,
already addressed, number of fruit,
determinantes,
and we have some components to explain the final figure.
baseados em dados.
It all based on data. Here we have also information based on projections. We have worked a lot together with our committee to have a more precise figure every year in terms of the final size that depends on the climate and also the fruit drop. So what's new here to provide us with more confidence
Aos anos anteriores.
the figure that we have this year as compared to those of previous years? Well, a series of studies have been carried out in the last years by the committee with the support of Professor Barbosa and Vinicius, and we managed to determine that there are three factors to explain 87% of the final size for the fruit.
Primeiro fator
First factor
é o número de frutos
is the number of fruit
que se tem, por exemplo, em abril. O número de frutos
in
parado.
April. That's the number of fruit that is set in the tree. We count that at stripping. A second factor
É o peso.
is the average weight of fruit. That is, how many fruit do I have in a box,
Esse peso em abril.
and what the weight is like in April. It's different for a bloom in August and a bloom in December. So different weight is found because we have not as much time for the fruit to develop, and that will affect size and weight. And a third factor that has been studied refers to rainfall, the climatic conditions. And what we could see is that the three most important months they are determinant to the final size are May, June, and July. That's when the fruit is in the final growth of its cycle. So if we have like May, June, and July with rainfall, then we have a trend, like last year, of having bigger and heavier fruit. So if you have the late fall and early winter that are dry, then we have a trend of having smaller fruit. So the weather will influence a lot. So if you add the three factors together and you consider their interaction among themselves, then that explains 87% of the size. That's a very strong correlation.
Por que que eu tô comentando?
Why am I talking about this? Well, this year, differently from previous year, we have a trend for a later bloom with a smaller size of fruit,
A derriça foi feita em abril.
as we could see at the April stripping, and we have a trend for the late fall and early winter that is drier and hotter. So that is adverse condition for the growth of the fruit. Keep in mind that 70% of groves are not irrigated, only 30% of them are. And here we can see that there is correlation that is direct mainly. So here the rainfall, May, June, and July, correlates to the final weight of the fruit. That is based on 10 previous years. So we come to this correlation with the trend of our having
Peso menor.
a smaller weight this year.
E foram os dados que
Here, some of the data we have analyzed. I'm not going to go into details.
a média de várias
This is an average of several companies from 2008-9 to 2017-18, and taking into consideration those three factors. So number of fruit
maio, julho,
and fruit per box in April, and rainfall accumulated from May to July. That's what we consider to determine the final fruit weight for each variety in the state of São Paulo. Another determining factor,
incrível que pareça,
as oddly as it seems, 17% of fruit drop.
o número do ano passado.
That is figure for last year. Previous year, 13%. That is very high number.
Fizemos trabalho
We have carried out work for the last 2 years to determine the different regions and ages and different strata to determine the cause for this drop. So let's analyze it. In 2016-17, with the smaller crop, we had a drop of 13.7%. Out of those 13.7%, 6% was a physiological drop or mechanical drop. The rest, pests and diseases were the cause. I draw your attention to the fact that that year the major problem was a black spot, fly, and borer, and greening came after that. In 2017-18, second year we carried out the study, the situation changed. Borer and fly are still important as a second reason for drop. Black spot decreased a little bit, but greening increased a lot. It moved from 1.4 to 4%. Then you ask myself, but Juliano, what about the incidence of the disease in the last 3 years? It was only 17%. How come you almost increased threefold this number? Well, we have the problem that is severity, and severity increases along years. A plant that is diseased is not going to be, not diseased anymore. So that will increase in severity and increase the fruit drop. Here we show in details how the situation was distributed in terms of the disease. 2017, 83% of healthy plants, 16.7% of diseased plants. When the plant is at a level 1 or 2, and the study was carried out by Fundecitrus, coordinated by Renato Basanesi for several years, and so data here comprises 7 to 8 years, crop years. So out of the 16.7, almost 11% is level 1 and 2. When the stage is worsened to levels 3 and 4, when most of the canopy is affected, then the loss may be up to 50 to 70%. This study shows what happens along years. For example, in average varieties for an 8-year-old growth. So after 1 year, we have the first symptoms, and then we lose what? 10% of the canopy is affected, 17%. And then here, 32%. At the end of 6 years period, then we have 68% loss. Part of the fruit will drop, and part will have their size reduced, and also their quality is going to be affected. That is something we have to really pay attention to, because there is a trend because of decreased severity for the fruit drop to increase. Let's now proceed to a table that is almost the last one here for us to understand what happened for the 288 of the estimated figure. What are the most important points to highlight here? 177, and here fruit per tree, 464, with a variation that is very intense in terms of varieties. Hamlin, another early, 766, Pera, with a much lower fruit number, 454, that affects the average, and the other ones similar to early and late varieties. When we estimate that, fruit per box evidently will change. The early variety needs more fruit to complete a box, and the late varieties will need fewer fruit for a box to be completed. Here, fruit per box, and this figure were used together with those three factors. So when we consider the weight of fruit, the amount of fruit, and the fact that we have had a drier winter. Average yield is shown here, drop rate a little bit lower than that of last year, but then when you have a smaller crop, then the trend for drop is smaller too, right? Yeah, but we have greening, so that can change in a dry year and hotter winter. So those are the assumptions that took us to the 288 million boxes final figure. Here we can see other details that we have mentioned before, the stratification of the area per sector, north, northwest, central, south, and southwest. The most important sectors are Central, the main one, and then North
e do Sudoeste.
and Southwest, areas that have grown together with the South, and Northwest that is not as relevant.
474.
Here,
Na região
the average
Sudoeste
density,
é onde tem
474.
mais frio.
Here we have this area with a higher density,
Cerca de 10%
that is southwest,
produtivas, tá
bearing trees, here stratified, northwest less important, the other ones more or less equivalent, except by the central area that has a higher number of 48 million bearing trees.
foi feita a ponderação.
Here we have weighted data,
Frutos por árvore na
fruit per
Grécia,
tree at stripping
como que tá
564, and how that is divided among regions.
dois extremos.
The two extreme values, northwest, when we have adverse weather, drier and hotter, with 314 fruit per plant, and the southwest region, where climate is more favorable, then we have 834 fruit per tree at stripping. Average yield 164
Observa em termos de produtividade por hectare.
boxes per tree, and here 762 ton per hectare as compared to 1,030 last year, so 28% reduction in comparison.
Finalmente terminando,
So to close,
quais serão os próximos passos?
I would like to mention the next steps.
Dia 21 de maio,
So May 21st, we're going to have a complete report.
sumário
We have a summarized report now for everything that has been announced with all the inventory and details. We have a lot of information there
apresentar para vocês.
that, more information that I was able to present to you today. So the estimate update will take place in September and then December,
Finalmente a terceira,
and the third one,
de fevereiro,
February next year.
fechamento da safra,
And
dia 10
the
do ano que vem.
closing of the crop figures in April next year.
Era isso, muito
That was
obrigado.
all. Thank you very
Vamos à
much.
sessão de discussão.
Now we're going to proceed to a Q&A session. Thank you very much for all of you being here present, especially and also those following us on broadcast live online. We have United States, Costa Rica, Austria, Portugal, Japan, Spain, Mexico, and France also watching us live. So I'd like to now invite Dr. Lorival Carlo Monaco to come to the stage again. General Manager Juliano Aires, the coordinator Marcos Fava Neves, Tomazella from the secretary, Vinicius Gustavo Trombin, coordinator, and also statistical coordinator Professor José Carlos Barbosa. Please come forward to the stage. Now we'll open the Q&A session. I'd like to ask you to speak on the microphone to ask a question. The microphone will be handed to you by our assistants. It's important that you use the microphone so that people watching us live can hear your question as well.
Bom dia.
Good morning.
Gustavo, repórter do podcast do Estadão.
I am Gustavo from Estadão. Juliano, I'd like to know, you talked briefly on something that I thought was really worrisome, that in 3 years there's been a decrease of 22.5% in the number of farms growing citrus in our citrus belt. I'd like you to tell me what's the reason for that. Is it only greening or is there another reason for that?
É uma pergunta complexa.
It's a very complex question.
Tem peso muito grande.
Greening has a very important
Doença, tem efeito de borda.
effect. We have the border effect in the first 200 meters. 80% of plants may be infected there. So, and that will also always hurt the mid and small size farms first, right? We have worked together with the private sector and the Secretary of Agriculture to improve that. But also there is a scale economy, present there, because in all crops, when we have a higher scale, you're more competitive. And that, I would say, affects this problem. But greening, with no question, is what caused this reduction, unfortunately, of the number of citrus growers. That's not only a problem in Brazil. That also is the case in Mexico, Costa Rica, and all Asian countries where this disease has been present, especially for small farms. If you do not have any further questions, if Professor Barbosa would like to add something, or Marcos, let's make the most of this time so that we can talk about something that we have forgotten. We have a lot of information that can be discussed. Thank you, Juliano. Just to add to what you answered to Gustavo, you mentioned the greening, but also I would like to talk about financial aspects, like also technological update and the region where growers are. See how interesting. If you are in the Northwest region this year, we can have 420 boxes per hectare average. If you're in the Southwest, 1,200 boxes per hectare. That is totally different income that you have from one region to the other. Professor Marcos Fava, well, the scenario that we have for juice and projection for next crop with a very drastic climate influence that may affect that figure for fresh fruit, maybe having a large demand for this year. How do you see this consumption situation and this influence on inventory? Thank you for your question. I have taken some notes in terms of like a summary for what this number can impact the market. So what we have is that in citrus BR as being transparent in terms of advertising or announcing inventory figures, we need 2 years of large crops for us to be in a comfortable situation. The second year is not going to be like that. So in a summary, we are going to have a crop that for the last 10 years is 11% lower now and 30% smaller than the previous crop, and still have had some climatic risks. So what we can have is a smaller number of boxes that are best paid. Maybe for the industry, that's not going to make any difference in terms of the concentration of the product. And probably there will be a slight change in the international prices of juice because inventory is not going to be in a very comfortable position, especially for Florida. So this is the way I see it. Maybe for growers, that's not going to change much because they're going to have fewer boxes at a higher price. But for the industrial sector in Europe and for the retail, we have to increase that a little because the situation is not comfortable. What helps the productive chain in Brazil is the currency of our money, and that may hurt the purchase of inputs. But what's important in terms of costs is that we have costs in reais, so that may help the citrus growers in the next 12 months. Good morning. I am Sergio. Out of the volume produced and presented, what is aimed at processing and what is aimed at fresh fruit? To anyone at the table, please answer.
Perguntando em relação
You mean in terms of the current crop?
a 2017.
2017.
Quer responder, Bebão?
Would you like to answer that? Ibiapaba. So I am Ibiapaba from Citrus BR. Within 10 days, more or less, we're going to provide you with the final figure for industry processing. But usually the fresh fruit is about 50 million boxes. It might be a little bit less or a little bit more. So if it's 50 million, then we have 398, 248. That's your answer, right? Professor Barbosa, do you have any comment? Any comments in terms of the recent changes? Anything else to present? Vinicius would like to add any additional detail? Well, some comments only on the methodology used. During 2017, we could perfect the methodology, and we then use statistical methods for estimating weight and drop, and even to improve the sampling technique for better fruit per tree to be found. So within the methods that we have introduced in this new methodology, well, first we used the 6 age categories, whereas in the past we had 3. In the past we had 1, 2, and 3 ages, and now we have 6 categories. That is age 1, 3 to 5, age 2, 3 to 6, 3, that is above 10, and then we have 2, 1, that is resets, that is 1 to 2, and 3, 1, 3, 2, there are resets of ages 1 and 2 in the plot that is age 3. So with this stratification, we could better estimate the number of fruit per tree. As for the projection in terms of weight, we have used multiple regression relating the final weight at harvest to the initial weight that is obtained at stripping and climate, that is rainfall for May, June, and July, in relation to the number of fruit per tree. Those are the 3 variables that most influence the growth of the fruit in that period. With that, we are moving from subjective data to a more objective one obtained from a model. And this model provides us with guidance. It's not the final figure because this model is also subject to error. It's estimated based on the last 10 crops or seasons, and also has variations in terms of projected and actual figures in terms of 3%, around 3%, because that depends also on the rainfall in that period. Because if you have an estimate, we use a model that depends on the rainfall that will take place May, June, and July. So in this model, we use a figure that is projected. So if we have more rainfall that we have the figure we use in the model, it might be that we have to correct that later on. If the rainfall is lower, the fruit's going to be smaller. If it rains more, then we're going to have bigger fruits. That's why we correct everything in December, November. So during the crop, we correct the estimate due to what happens in terms of climate and fruit drop, because during the crop, we also have a follow-up of 900 plots. This year, 1,200 plots are going to be monitored for increased information in terms of fruit drop and all that. So we have estimates carried out throughout the crop so that we have this final figure that is increasingly more reliable. So we have more people participating in our survey, and we need increasingly more reliable methods. In terms of the methodology, what we can say is that I believe that this estimate is much better than the previous ones that we carried out before. Thank you.
Eu queria, como não existe pelo menos nenhuma pergunta,
It seems we have no further questions, so I'd like to first thank you all for coming. And I'm sorry, he says. It seems there is a question. I am Mary from Jusipec Brazil and Tradework Europe. It's been said that for bearing trees, we see an increased planting for Pera-Rio, especially in comparison to Valencia. So two questions arise. First, what's the reason for an increased planting of Pera-Rio? And if so, what would be the impact of that in the production of concentrated juice and also NFC?
a explicação que nós temos são
The explanation, in fact, is twofold. Pera-Rio is the main fresh fruit.
o mercado tem sido aquecido
So the market has been
e existe uma menor disponibilidade
has been an upward trend. So we have a lower availability of fruit in that period you mentioned. So part of that
da Valência.
was then, part of the Valencia was replaced by Pera
O industrial estava precisando.
that had a production below what the processing industry needed. But that may even help in a better distribution of fruit along the year. So both from the industrial point of view and the fresh fruit market, maybe we needed, more Pera. That's why we planted more Pera.
Mais alguma pergunta?
Any other question?
Bom, então eu queria
So now I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I'd like to
fez excelente
praise our technical team for their work, for also keeping data confidential all the time. And also I'd like to draw your attention to a very important aspect. Today, the concern of a PES and Fundecitrus is to put together all the links of the productive chain for citrus production. Before, we dealt more with the industry, and now we have all the segments included, because with no questions, problems are common. And for sure, we will improve a lot our Brazilian citrus production if we deal with the whole. And finally, I'd like to highlight the problem of greening. I always insist on greening being a problem of the society as a whole, not only of citrus growers. So we have two actions carried out with the Secretary of Agriculture and other agencies for a larger eradication program for abandoned trees and groves. And on May 22nd and 3rd at UNIP, we are going to have an international seminar on greening. The main objective of that is we get rid of greening, or we have to work much more intensely in terms of finding the reason for that. For understanding greening. So I hope that we have more encouraging news about greening in the future. Thank you very much. I would like to break a little bit our schedule to congratulate two people. As an expert on productive chains, I cannot fail to praise you, because citriculture is an example here in Brazil to other productive chains in Brazil. We have the mechanism of crop estimate that is more transparent with the high statistical figures behind. So this is also a new auditorium, so I'd like to congratulate Dr. Monaco for his brilliant administration of Fundecitrus. I'd like to greet and to praise the whole Fundecitrus team for allowing us to have such great facilities for our meeting. Congratulations, Dr. Monaco. Thank you very much for all of you here present. Just would like to say that all this is only possible with the support of citrus growers that allow survey agents to enter their farms. I also would like to thank the all of you participating in this partnership. And I also like to thank the support from the Executive Committee of Fundas Citrus, and also for strengthening the links of this citrus chain and to democratize information. I also would like to thank the following companies: Citrosuco, Cutrale, and Louis Dreyfus, for once again allowing us to enter their groves and so that they could be part of our sampling size for finding out the fruit size along the crop. Also, I'd like to thank the efforts of the technical committee and the exchange of information that is vital for the increased improvement of our work and our constant pursuit of better technology. I'd like to thank the Secretary of Agriculture and Supply in the state of Sao Paulo for supplying us with the information in terms of the amount of citrus nursery plants that have been traded with the required plant transit permit in the state of Sao Paulo in 2017. I'd like to thank the efforts of all survey agents towards meeting deadlines and keeping a high-quality standard in the survey in an ethical and efficient way. Lastly, we'll remind you that the summary of the crop estimate survey will be published yet today on the Fundas Citrus website. The full report is going to be made available within the next 15 days. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. On behalf of Fundas Citrus, the Fund for Citrus Protection, we thank you all for coming or for watching our live broadcast online. Those in the United States, Costa Rica, Germany, Austria, Portugal, Japan, Spain, Mexico, and France. Thank you very much for attending our meeting. Have an excellent day, a great afternoon, and see you next time. Goodbye.